Students are now in the midst of taking required Ohio State tests, and those results later this year are likely to show that learning loss during the pandemic is still real for a huge number of students. The state has paused punitive penalties against K-12 schools whose students are not performing well. That has school leaders and lawmakers looking at what can be done to help those kids recover and catch up, and also deal with problems outside of school the pandemic may have made worse. In February, Statehouse correspondent Jo Ingles reported on those concerns.
A 6, a 4, and a 7. Which one is the smaller number of those 4, Aria?
First grade teacher Alyssa Boos says she knows the pandemic has posed special challenges for many of her students at Worthington Park Elementary School near Columbus.
I think one of the things I noticed the most is that just the understanding of what school is for them. Last year, some of them had a completely virtual kindergarten experience. Some of them were here half the time. Some of them were homeschooled and some weren't even at the school. So I think the biggest challenge for them has been having that stamina to stay focused long enough and to kind of have that same baseline for everybody to kind of all learn together. But it's been a huge adjustment since the first part of the school year, but they've come a long way.
Worthington is more diverse than some other suburban Columbus districts, and it usually scores above average on statewide tests. But even here, teachers know there are kids who need extra help. Republican Andrew Brenner heads the Senate's K-12 Education Committee. He's been critical of COVID policies such as mask mandates and vaccine requirements, but he says COVID disrupted learning in all schools as kids and teachers became ill and had to quarantine. He says some urban districts had a 74% chronic absentee rate, meaning kids had 18 or more days of unexcused absences. And he says proficiency tests given in key grades last year show the schools that were most impacted were urban schools with remote learning, like Youngstown, for example.
I've been asking people, what do you think the fifth grade proficiency rate was for the fifth grade math class in Youngstown City Schools? And I usually get, and everybody thinks about it because they know that Youngstown's been under academic distress, I'll get 20s, 30s, and 40s as the passage rate. And then I told them the real number is 2.9%, meaning 97% of the kids failed the proficiency test for fifth grade math in Youngstown. But I said that they outperformed East Cleveland City Schools by a full percentage point. That gets people's attention. And so we've got to do a much better job of working to get these kids back into school, getting them in full time, and we need to remediate them.
A review of test scores by the Ohio Department of Education last September noted across the board, students were down about 8 points lower in state language arts tests and about 15 points down in math. Brenner says lawmakers have been talking to leaders at Ohio's colleges about allowing students who are majoring in education to tutor K-12 students and maybe even get paid for doing it. The Ohio Department of Education thinks tutoring is a good idea.
I think there's a great interest in tutoring, sort of intensive tutoring. That's something that I think we're starting to see in other states, and the state, districts are working with different partners. I mean, part of the challenge is being able to find tutors. I mean, obviously we've got sort of larger, kind of workforce questions, but that is definitely something that folks are interested in. Again, I think you're starting to see some creative solutions. I know we were talking to some folks in one of our urban districts who was sort of doubling. The phrase they were using was sort of like back-to-back teaching, where they were sort of bringing two teachers into a room and sort of really focusing and sort of splitting the students, but tag teaming it a bit and bringing some more instructional resources to bear.
Back at the Worthington School District, teachers are using one-on-one tutoring as well as learning in small groups to deal with kids at different academic levels. And they're trying to focus on needs that exist outside the classroom, too.
I get to serve as the Assistant Superintendent of Academics. Sometimes I wish that title was also the Assistant Superintendent of Well-Being.
Angie Adrian with Worthington Schools says students who need extra help and resources are being offered those through summer school with the help of community partnerships.
We were worried a little bit about staff. Are teachers going to be have the energy to come into summer school and teach all summer? And they did. We had teachers there, but we also have a really strong food service who provided food for our students. Transportation jumped on board and said, how do we make sure that we are also a part of this solution and making sure that our students are provided transportation to and from summer school. And our Worthington Resource Food Pantry stepped up and provided food for our students in summer school as well.
Those wraparound services, such as food, tutoring, and mental health counseling, were seen as important for at-risk kids even before the pandemic, and schools are able to use COVID relief funds to support them. Worthington Elementary School Principal Patrick Garrity says there's one more thing that's crucial right now, focusing on self-control, self-awareness, and other skills that help kids work and play together.
The hardest part of all of this is supporting our students with that social emotional learning and recognizing that we're not getting our consecutive 180 plus days face to face with kids. We are triaging situations where kids are out of school because they are sick and out of school for things they cannot control based off of close contact. So really making sure that when we are losing students and not having that in person, we're finding ways to connect with them outside of the school setting, ensuring they're getting work at their house, making those phone calls, doing Zoom sessions when possible to get those kids connected, and really just connecting and making sure they feel comfortable at school.
Education leaders say there's one thing that's become clear during this pandemic. Different children have different needs. And they say the remedy to lifting up students who are behind is meeting them where they are and making sure their educational as well as emotional and physical needs are being met. But that will take time. Jo Ingles, Statehouse News Bureau.